The book actually begins with a verse from one of the stanzas of Vande Mataram, which we've probably forgotten, which is not normally recited when it comes to rendering of the national song. And I thought I'll start with that. We know about the battles of Panipat, where again India lost, Indians lost. We know about the Battle of Buxar, the Battle of Plassey, the Anglo-Maratha wars, the Anglo-Mysore wars, the Anglo-Sikh wars, all of these. And the common thread in all of this is that we lost. We were a nation of losers, and that is something our colonial masters tried to din into our heads. That, right from the early times when the Aryans came from outside, you are not destined to rule your own land. It's only someone from the outside who will come and give you a sense of civilization, give you a sense of education, culture, and all of that. And so the British invasion was just a natural progression, so to say, in this long litany of defeats. Lalitaditya Muktapida of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir. The Karkota dynasty itself has been extensively documented along with the other Hindu dynasties of Kashmir up to the 12th and 13th centuries by Kalhana in the Rajatarangini. Similarly, you had Rajendra Chola and Rajaraja Chola, who ensured that the sphere of influence of Bharat went beyond the geographical confines today to Maldives, to Sri Lanka, and all the way up to Sri Vijaya in the Malay Peninsula in 1025 CE when it was attacked. Rudramma Devi of Warangal, one of the early women rulers of the Kakatiya dynasty of today's Andhra. Rana Kumbha of Mewar, who was an unvanquished ruler all his life, and he's built probably the largest or the longest wall in India after the Great Wall of China, the Kumbhalgarh Fort. Similarly, Rani Abbakka from the state I come from, Karnataka. Martanda Varma from Kerala, the founder of the Travancore family there. Similarly, Kanhoji Angre, the first naval admiral of the Maratha dynasty. Lachit Barphukan from the Ahom, general of the Ahom army, who in the Battle of Saraighat ensured that Aurangzeb's largest imperial force, he had sent one of the largest imperial forces to Kamrup to destroy the Ahoms. And from your own state of Gujarat, Dr. Kakkar mentioned the Chalukyas. You had this wonderful personality called Rani Naiki Devi, who in 1178, in what was known as the Battle of Kasarhada, ensured that Muhammad Ghori was completely devastated and vanquished. Muhammad Ghori had thought that this is a easy, low-hanging fruit to occupy Gujarat because it was then under a woman regent. The ruler had died, Ajay Pala, and the little infant, Mool Deva, who was Naiki Devi's son, was placed on throne and she was the regent. But little did Ghori realize that in the Battle of Kasarhada, he would be defeated by a woman, and so embarrassed and humiliated was he that he never turned back at Gujarat again. And it took several decades later for Aibak to come and occupy Gujarat. We are not a violent nation. We are not someone who will aggressively go and occupy another country or proactively attack someone. So, that muhavra of laton ke bhoot baaton se nahi mante, till the time people pick up arms and ensure that you're driven out, a colonizing power like Britain would not have left India.
So, I'll quickly take you through what is going to happen in the first talk. The first part would be the book launch. The second part would be the address by the speaker. The third part would be the interaction with the audience. And the fourth would be Indic Samvad. So, this is what this entire event is going to be all about. May I please invite Dr. Ankur Kakkar, Assistant Professor, Center for Indic Studies, to share his views on this spectacular book written by Vikram Sampath ji. Please, sir. Thank you.
Namaste, everyone. Dignitaries on the stage, respected faculty members, and dear friends. I welcome you all to the launch of Dr. Vikram Sampath's book titled Bravehearts of Bharat. This book describes the life stories of 15 great warriors of India. Yesterday, Professor V. Ramanathan told us about the distortions in our school history textbooks, which give us the impression that we easily surrendered to every foreign power, be it the Arabs, the Turks, the Mughals, or later the Dutch, the Portuguese, and finally the British. How can we expect our youth to take pride in our nation when they are taught that their ancestors lost to everyone? Right from the fabricated Aryan invasion theory to the British colonial subjugation of Indian kings. Our history textbooks narrate how one kingdom after another was conquered by foreign invaders. But seldom are we told about how we bravely resisted the invasions, fought back, and won many battles. In Gujarat, for instance, the Chalukyas successfully repelled the Islamic invaders for almost 600 years after Muhammad bin Qasim had conquered Sindh. The result was that Gujarat came under Islamic rule only as late as 1300 CE. This story of resistance, like many others, has never been told to us with pride and not given any space in our textbooks. Therefore, I believe that this book by Dr. Vikram Sampath, titled Bravehearts of Bharat, is a must read for everyone who wants to learn about our heroes and feel inspired, especially at a time when school textbooks and dominant mainstream media are busy peddling a distorted narrative of history. We have someone with us who is doing a remarkable job in countering these distortions. For over a decade now, Dr. Vikram Sampath has been producing excellent historical work. Dr. Sampath's highly acclaimed two-volume biography of Veer Savarkar is a wonderful example of how a scholarly work can change our discourse. Dr. Sampath's work also shows us the way how history books should be written. With these words, I once again welcome Dr. Vikram Sampath and I cordially invite him to tell us more about his book.
With the wonderful words by Dr. Ankur Kakkar, we move towards the very first part of this event, the very major part, that is the book launch. Brave Hearts of Bharat. May I please request all the dignitaries to launch their book? Can we have the books, please? Thank you. Before we invite Dr. Vikram Sampath for the talk, let us know a few details about him. I'm sure they are as interesting as the books written by him. Bangalore-based historian Dr. Vikram Sampath is the author of 8 acclaimed books. First, Splendors of Royal Mysore, the Untold Story of the Wodeyars. Second, My Name Is Gauhar Jaan, the life and times of a musician. Third, Voice of the Veena, S. Balachander, a biography. Fourth, Women of the Records. Fifth, Indian classical music and the gramophone, 1900 to 1930. And the latest one, Bravehearts of Bharat. His two-volume biography, Savarkar, Echoes from a Forgotten Past, and Savarkar, A Contested Legacy, went on to become national bestsellers and were acclaimed by Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. In 2021, Dr. Sampath was conferred with the honor of being elected as a Fellow of UK's prestigious Royal Historical Society. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy's first Yuva Puraskar in English Literature and the ARSC International Award for Excellence in Historical Research in New York for his book on Gauhar Jaan. The book has also been adapted to theatre as a play, Gauhar, by Lilliet Dubey, and is being adapted to a Bollywood film by Ashutosh Guwarikar. Dr. Sampath was among the 4 writers and the artists to be selected as a writer in residence at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in 2015. He has a doctorate in history and music in the university from the University of Queensland, Australia, and was senior research fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, New Delhi. He is also an Aspen Global Leadership Fellow and an Eisenhower Global Fellow 2021 and currently is a senior adjunct at Monash University, Australia, an engineer, mathematician from BITS Pilani, and an MBA in finance from SP Jain, Mumbai. Dr. Sampath is also a trained Carnatic vocalist. He has established the Archive of Indian Music, India's first digital sound archive for vintage recordings, is the founder, director of the Bangalore Literature Festival, Indic Thoughts Festival, and Earth, a cultural fest. These are just the few details. Trust me, the list is too long, and therefore, without taking much time, I would like to invite Dr. Sampath himself. Thank you. Please, sir.
A very good morning to all the dignitaries on stage, faculty members, and dear students. It's truly a very special occasion for me today. This is the last of a 10-city book tour with this new book, Bravehearts of Bharat, and I deem it my privilege, a pleasure that it's being launched at such a special venue like the Indus University, and I'm extremely thankful and grateful to all the members of the university, my dear friend Dr. Ankur, Kakkar, and everybody else who's here. The book actually begins with a verse from one of the stanzas of Vande Mataram, which we've probably forgotten, which is not normally recited when it comes to rendering of the national song. And I thought I'll start with that. Koti koti kantha kala kala ninad karale, koti koti bhujay dhrita khara karavale, abla kenoma eto bole, bahubala dharinim namami tarinim, ripudala varinim mataram, Vande Mataram. Bankim Chandra's these immortal lines were then translated by another great scholar, symbol of our freedom movement and spiritual renaissance, Sri Aurobindo. And he had this to say in translation of these verses, and I'll quote him here. Who hath said, mother, that thou art weak, when the sword flesh out in the 70 million hands, and 70 million voices roar thy dreadful name from shore to shore, with many strengths who art mighty and stored, to thee I call, O Mother and Lord. Thou who savest, arise and save. To her I cry, whoever her foe man drove back from plain and sea and shook herself free. Unquote. I think this spirit that was, tried to be kindled in the course of our freedom movement, especially by the revolutionaries, those who took to the arms to liberate our motherland, symbolized by these verses of Bankim Chandra and the efforts of all the other revolutionaries of the time, whether it was Sri Aurobindo, whether it was Veer Savarkar, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. I think they were all drawing to that part of our history which was suppressed over several centuries of colonial rule. As Dr. Kakkar mentioned, this whole idea that invaders after invaders kept coming to this subcontinent, and all that we did was covered in front of them and kept getting defeated. Now, even all of you in your growing up years, or even now in your history textbooks, the battles that stay in your mind are unfortunately the battles where we as India or Indians lost. Right from the myth of the Aryan invasion theory to maybe Alexander's invasion, the Shakas, the Hunas, all of them who came in the ancient times, to the Arab invasion. All of us know about Muhammad bin Qasim. Am I right? I mean, we've all heard of Muhammad bin Qasim, we've heard of the invasion of Sindh in 712, but we would probably have never heard of Raja Dahar or his predecessor, Chacha, whose exploits in Sindh are documented in the Chachnama, who ensured that Sindh was kept free after 60-70 years of attacks by the Arabs. Right from 630 CE, it was finally only in 712 or so when Muhammad bin Qasim finally managed to conquer Sindh by defeating Dahar. But we all know about Muhammad bin Qasim, but not about Raja Dahar. And that says a lot about what history is being taught to us and why. We know about the battles of Panipat, where again India lost, Indians lost. We know about the Battle of Buxar, the Battle of Plassey, the Anglo-Maratha wars, the Anglo-Mysore wars, the Anglo-Sikh wars, all of these. And the common thread in all of this is that we lost. We were a nation of losers, and that is something our colonial masters tried to din into our heads. That, right from the early times when the Aryans came from outside, you are not destined to rule your own land. It's only someone from the outside who will come and give you a sense of civilization, give you a sense of education, culture, and all of that. And so the British invasion was just a natural progression, so to say, in this long litany of defeats. Unfortunately, after independence, we had a golden moment to rectify and reclaim this past in the long waves of decolonization that different parts of the world have seen. But there again, unfortunately, I think our history got so intertwined with ideological conflicts. It's been in the stranglehold of a certain ideology which added more distortions to the history that was handed down to us by our erstwhile colonial masters. And the net result is such a fragmented, such a distorted version of our own past, our achievements, and so on, that we look back at ourselves with so much of self-loathing, so much of a sense of a heen bhavana about ourselves, that we are not even able to keep our spine erect and say, yes, these are certain things that we can be genuinely proud of. There is a very thin line between jingoism, chest thumping and saying everything about our past is great and we were the best and all of that, to the other extreme, saying looking only at the negatives, looking only at failures, and the negatives of the society. Every society goes through its positives and negatives, but our historiography focuses so much on the negatives that it outweighs all the other genuine achievements for which we can be proud of. So, as Dr. Kakkar mentioned, this book tries to, in a very small way, reverse that trend in our historiography. It covers the lives, it does this through, the lives of 15 people from different parts of India. And there again, another very important, I think loophole in the manner in which Indian history is written. You'd all agree with me that Indian history is so very Delhi-centric. Not only history, everything, our entire understanding or narrative of India or Bharat itself is all about Delhi. You look at even the media, you look at the news, large parts of India could be going down under floods, the northeast, whereas that doesn't feature in the mainstream news at all. Delhi, some, municipal corporation elections also is given so much importance, that there is so much of discussion around it as if that is national news. There are 800, 900 universities all over India, including this one. But in Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University, some two people throwing some stones at each other, that becomes national news, and that is conflated as the big idea of India. So similarly, even in the history of India, Delhi occupies an incommensurate importance. I have nothing against the place, it's a beautiful city, but then Bharat needs to snatch back her history, her narrative from Delhi. We learn about all the little kingdoms which ruled probably for a few decades, the Lodhis and Khiljis and Tughlaqs and so on, whose sphere of influence was largely limited to a very small part of that of our country. But then we learn all about them. We know the succession lines of all of them, whereas their contribution to this civilization or this country is near equal to zilch. But large swathes of India, the south of India, from where I come from where Arvindji also comes from, doesn't feature in the history of India in the manner in which it should. The mighty Cholas, who ruled for 1,000 years almost, with lot of breaks in the middle, the Pandyas, the Shatavahanas, Rashtrakutas, Pallavas, Gangas, Kadambas, the Wodeyars of Mysore, the Travancore rulers, such enlightened rulers, all these people do not feature in that larger story of the history of India. The northeast of India, I don't know if we think of the northeast as a part of this country at all. In the larger history of Bharat, do we even know beyond probably naming the 7 states there and their capitals, maybe with a lot of difficulty? Do we know who are the rulers who were there from that place? The Ahoms of Assam ruled for 600 years, but can we name 2 Ahom kings or 3 Ahom kings? It will be a difficult task. The Metis of Manipur, the rulers of Tripura, Nagaland, all these people are a part of India. And if you're saying the history of Bharat, history of India, it has to be inclusive. It has to include all parts of India. So this was another very important defect in our historiography, which I noticed. The third one was, there are lots of girls in the audience, the history of India has always been his story, where her story never gets the importance that it truly deserves. The women and the very important role that they played, both in positions of power and also in positions of learning, positions of common women too, that doesn't get the commensurate importance in the manner in which we tell our own story. So it is to try to balance some of these loopholes that I made a choice of the 15 characters of this book, 7 of whom are women and 8 men, coming from all different parts of India, traditionally ignored by mainstream historiography. Lalitaditya Muktapida of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir. How many of you had really heard of him? Show of hands. How many had heard of Lalitaditya? Wow, that's one person in a huge audience here. I think that proves my point here. Lalitaditya was somebody who ensured that the Arabs were kept at bay, and beyond that narrow strip of Sindh, the Arabs could not capture much more of Bharat. The Karkota dynasty itself has been extensively documented along with the other Hindu dynasties of Kashmir up to the 12th and 13th centuries by Kalhana in the Rajatarangini. So there is no dearth of information, there is no dearth of documentation. It's just that we did not think these were important to be told, these stories important to be told. He was in fact called the second Samudragupta of India. Similarly, you had Rajendra Chola and Rajaraja Chola, who ensured that the sphere of influence of Bharat went beyond the geographical confines today to Maldives, to Sri Lanka, and all the way up to Sri Vijaya in the Malay Peninsula in 1025 CE when it was attacked. Rudramma Devi of Warangal, one of the early women rulers of the Kakatiya dynasty of today's Andhra, who died fighting in battle at the ripe old age of 80. Rana Kumbha of Mewar, who was an unvanquished ruler all his life. And he's built probably the largest or the longest wall in India after the Great Wall of China, the Kumbhalgarh Fort, which is there in neighboring Rajasthan. Similarly, Rani Abbakka from the state I come from, Karnataka, who dealt a death blow to the Portuguese in Ullal, in a small little principality in coastal Karnataka that she ruled in. Martanda Varma from Kerala, the founder of the Travancore family there, who in a battle known as the Battle of Kolachal ensured that the Dutch East India Company were completely vanquished, so much so that the Dutch idea of occupation of India and colonizing India was also completely destroyed. Similarly, Kanhoji Angre, the first naval admiral of the Maratha dynasty, Lachit Barphukan from the Ahom, general of the Ahom army, who in the Battle of Sarai Ghat ensured that Aurangzeb's largest imperial force, he had sent one of the largest imperial forces to Kamrup to destroy the Ahoms, that was repelled in the Battle of Sarai Ghat. And from your own state of Gujarat, Dr. Kakkar mentioned the Chalukyas, you had this wonderful personality called Rani Naiki Devi, who in 1178, in what was known as the Battle of Kasarhada, ensured that Muhammad Ghori was completely devastated and vanquished. Muhammad Ghori had thought that this is a easy, low-hanging fruit to occupy Gujarat because it was then under a woman regent. The ruler had died, Ajay Pala, and the little infant, Mool Deva, who was Naiki Devi's son, was placed on throne and she was the regent. But little did Ghori realize that in the Battle of Kasarhada, he would be defeated by a woman, and so embarrassed and humiliated was he that he never turned back at Gujarat again, and it took several decades later for Aibak to come and occupy Gujarat. But even in the chronicles of Gujarat of the time, Merutunga, Ari Simha, Somashekhara, all these people who wrote about the history of the Chalukya Vansh, you have so little documentation about Naiki Devi. So this book, therefore, friends, is an attempt to bring back these stories into circulation, bring back some of these names into circulation, and to bring back in the larger context, as Bankim Chandra had said, and as I quoted in the start, that Kshatra spirit within all of us, that we are not a violent nation, we are not someone who will aggressively go and occupy another country or proactively attack someone, but at the same time we are someone who will ensure that we will fight for our freedom, we will pick up arms. And absolute non-violence has never been a part of the Indic tradition. All our gods and goddesses are shown with astras and shastras, adorning them. Those are not just for ornamentation. They are for the battle of dharma against adharma. So whom you consider adharmic, to pick up arms against them is a very legitimate duty, and to be completely pacifist is a crime in the larger Indic or Hindu tradition. So this is the larger message from this book, and I do hope all of you would read some of these stories. They're highly inspiring, and it opens a new window to India and her history, as I too did and discovered in the course of my research. Once again, thank you all so much for this opportunity, and look forward to some interesting questions from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sampath. Before we go ahead, I would like to invite Shri Arvindan Neelkandanji to share his observations on the book as well as on the works of Dr. Sampath. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and my pranams to all the persons who are on the dais and in the audience. This book consists of, actually in the chapters, there are 15 great Bravehearts of India. The book actually talks about 16 Bravehearts of India, because the chapter on Rajaraja Chola also includes Rajendra Chola. And this book actually is a very corrective measure at one level. At another level, it is a continuation of a very great tradition of Indian historiography that we are, most of the time, we take it for granted or we are unaware of it. So when the Britishers came, as Dr. Sampath correctly pointed out, when the Britishers came, they wanted to make us feel that we were a defeated nation. There was also another one aspect to it. It was that we are getting civilized by the British. So we are a lesser civilization. Why we were getting defeated? There were two reasons. One was that we were racially inferior. But that was very easily proven wrong. Then there was another one reason they gave. It was that because we were civilizationally inferior. That particular notion continues to this day. And it was being reinforced by another one great ideologue, M.N. Roy. M.N. Roy, who was the first Marxist leader of this nation, he pointed out that the monotheistic civilizations are civilizationally superior to polytheistic civilizations. And hence the polytheistic civilizations by nature are having social stagnation, and then the monotheistic civilizations, they were liberating civilizations. So when they came and invaded India, they were actually not invading India, they were liberating India from the clutches of their own priestcraft and their own oppressors. So that was the narrative set. And then this narrative was taken over by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, unfortunately. In Discovery of India, you can see the same thing again repeated. And then Discovery of India in post-independent India, Discovery of India became the framework for writing all the textbooks. And then comes Romila Thapar, and she adds another one narrative, and that even more demonizes the core Indian civilization. So Indian civilization is inferior to the Western civilization. So we have to be defeated by the very laws of history. Hence, these defeats were kind of seen as progressive steps in civilization. It is this particular historiography that is getting corrected by this book. When the Britishers were there, Veer Savarkar actually tried to rectify this historiography, and he started writing the glorious 6 epochs of Indian history, and it went on till 1960s, and he wrote it. It is really a blessing to see that what Veer Savarkar started, Dr. Vikram Sampath had been continuing that and presenting it to the present generation in such a wonderful way. So it is really satisfying. And at another level, when the Nehruvian discourse was there and its stranglehold was there in the entire Indian education system, one person, through his effort, tried to rectify it. That was Uncle Pai, also called Anant Pai, and he created Amar Chitra Kada, and it was the Amar Chitra Kada that took all those beautiful stories in comics form to each and every nook and corner of India. I read about Lalita Aditya for the first time in Amar Chitra Kada, and most probably a child from Punjab would have learned about Kannagi or Rajaraja Chola from Amar Chitra Kada. But then after Uncle Pai, everything changed. There was a hiatus. After that comes Vikram Sampath. He had actually inherited, I would say, he is the step forward of Uncle Pai and Veer Savarkar combined together, and he has, when he had produced this particular book. And this book contains, as we said, 16 warriors, of which 7 are women. And there is the Rudrama Devi that he talks about. I just want to give you some 2 or 3 examples from inside the book to point out how important this book is. Yesterday, we heard when Dr. Ramanathan said how Rudrama Devi was portrayed in the 7th standard NCERT book as a kind of a woman who yielded to patriarchy, a woman who pretended to be man, who she was ashamed of her gender. That is what 7th standard children are being taught by CBSE about Rudrama Devi. Here he points out not only Rudrama Devi was a great queen, also when Marco Polo visited the entire world, it was the only independent queen he found was Rudrama Devi. And Rudrama Devi effected such wonderful reforms in her administration. She removed the hierarchical birth-based feudal lords, and she brought in meritorious officers from all sections of the society. Think about it. A queen effected this radical social reform centuries before. We talk about affirmative action and everything. And this book brings out that. And he told about Nayaki Devi. The case of Nayaki Devi, even the Islamic chroniclers of history, they have mentioned about the defeat that Muhammad Ghori suffered at the hands of this queen. What even the Islamic chroniclers did, our historians of the modern day, our textbook writers are not doing. See how much we have fallen in writing proper historiography that elevates our spirits. And then this book also talks about 2 great Islamic queens, Chand Bibi and Begum Hasrat, And Chand Bibi was, he points that out. Chand Bibi was projected as the model for Islamic women's education by Muslim social reformers. So this book actually gives a very great pan-Indian vision for us. It talks about Rajaraja Chola and Rajendra Chola. And in that there are also very important tangential references which the researchers can pursue. They had something called Ra Palagai when they were traveling in their ships for naval expeditions. They had something called Ra Palagai which was used as a star chart to identify the navigation routes. What was this particular Ra Palagai? How it worked? What kind of astronomical knowledge those people had? From this can be a starting point for another academic expedition, another historical investigation for the inquisitive young minds. So this book contains such a lot of treasures in it. I request each and every one of you to get this book, go through it, then choose your own hero or heroine, and then pursue his or her life and try to add more to the historiography of India. That is one. And then his two biographies, 2-volume biographies of Veer Savarkar. I have read Dhananjay Kir's biography of Veer Savarkar. There have been certain questions raised over certain the references that he had given. For example, Dhananjay Kir talks about Azad Hind radio broadcast in which Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose actually praised Savarkar. But the later day historians, with the view to actually also defame Savarkar, they have said that such a broadcast never existed. You couldn't find that. And used to think that, oh, this is really a damaging aspect. And when his second volume biography came and I looked into it, he had actually substantiated it by going into the archives and finding out the letters written by the soldiers in INA who had actually substantiated the fact that their recruitment into the army was because of Savarkar, and they saw this as a means to fight for the freedom of India. So those 2 volumes of Savarkar, they again are really a great contribution to the modern historiography. It has actually changed the way history is being written in this nation. This is a start of an important revolution. I really hope and pray that Dr. Vikram Sampath would be bringing out more and more books, not only on the Bravehearts of India, but also on the important personalities of India who have been hitherto kind of been ignored so far. For example, take all the Bravehearts here, and you will find that behind them there had been a spiritual personality. Right? And it is actually the history of these spiritual personalities that had created the nation called India. As I said yesterday, without the Bhakti movement, you won't be having Kabir. Without Kabir, you won't be having Khalsa. Without Khalsa, entire North India would have become part of Pakistan. So these saints, perhaps we would also have soon a volume on the great saints of India who have been made unknown to the different parts of India because of the present day historiography. And I am thankful for inviting me to share my thoughts on this. This is really a great occasion, and my gratitude to the people who invited me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arvindan sir. One thing that could be carved out from what Dr. Sampath ji said and from what Arvindan ji said is that if soldiers are required at the borders, rural cities and urban places have no different story to narrate. Even over here, we require soldiers. And who are they in the cities? If I may use the term, theoretical soldiers, that is the researchers who dig out the truth that is hidden by the historians. It is people like Vikram Sampath ji, Arvindan Neelkandan ji, who help us bring out the hidden narratives, who help us bring out the truth of what Indians are and what certain people are doing over here, what certain Breaking India forces are doing over here to demolish us as a country. So, thank you so much, Dr. Vikram, sir, for explicitly or maybe at times implicitly trying to fight out the Breaking India forces. Thank you so much. It is pleasure to have people like you who work day and night to bring out to us. With this, we open the stage for questions to Dr. Sampath ji.
Who was the deadliest enemy to the Bharatvarsh of the Arabs, the Turks, the Mughals, the Dutch, or the Portuguese?
It is very difficult to say who was the deadliest. I think each one of them, in their own manners, harmed this country. The Arabs, when they came here, as I said, right from 630 CE and so on, it was largely with a view of looting. The Turks too, whether it was Muhammad Ghazni or Muhammad Ghori, the idea was not so much to occupy the country or to make it a colony and so on, but it was more of looting the treasures. So in fact, the kind of the treasures, the prosperity that Bharatvarsh had at that time is what attracted all these luteras to come here. So their goal was different. The Mughals, actually, they should be called as the Timurids. That's their name. They would actually not look down on the term Mughals itself, but we call them as the Mughals. They came also with the same intention, but later settled down here. But always, and this whole idea that they became us and all that is told to us, I think that is also quite a lot of bunkum, because in the long centuries of their rule here, what did they do for the country in terms of, did they establish educational institutions, did they ensure any kind of social improvement? It was only confiscation of power in their hands and in the accumulation of wealth. Now if you read Angus Madison's account of world economic history, they say even at the height of Mughal rule, when India's GDP percentage as a share of world GDP was still quite high, because obviously a lot of money stayed here rather than go outside, the per capita GDP of every person, that was a steady decline, and it almost came to a negative, which means people were getting poorer and poorer while there was accumulation of wealth in the hands of the ruler. The European powers were a complete different, kettle of fish, where their idea was to come as traders and then through the back door ensure that not only there was economic and political subjugation of the country, but I think European colonialism did something which was more dangerous, of which we are still facing, the repercussions, which is intellectual subjugation. Those infamous minutes of Macaulay in 1835, where he said that the entire objective of English education is to create this vast class of interpreters, only interpreters between us, the rulers, and the millions whom we govern, who are only Indian in their blood and their skin color, but they are English in their taste, in their opinions, in their morals, and in their intellect. And I think that is so true today. The irony of it is I'm giving this talk to you in English. You're asking me this question in English. We are all dressed, in English clothes, and we follow everything that the British left and went, right, including the way our convocation ceremonies are held, the attire there. Slowly things are changing. But still it's a long way. So while that was more of material conquest, looting of the economic wealth of India, I think as centuries passed, the mental subjugation, and therein this concept that, we are a very, the nation of losers, we are not good enough. When you put that seed into a civilization and a people, they can really not stand up with any amount of self-esteem and face the new world with self-confidence. As I said, it's not jingoism, it is a sense of self-confidence about yourself. And I think that element of colonialism is the hardest to get rid of. It's comparatively easier to probably get political freedom, but how do you get freedom from mental slavery? How do you get freedom from intellectual colonizing and subjugation? That would take probably several generations, but I think the process has begun in India, which is a good part. Thank you.
Can we please have the second question by Dara Patel?
Good morning, everyone. I would like to ask you a question. Are they only warriors and fighters, did uh, or did they also play a role in a cultural and artistic revival?
That's a great question. And I think, if you go through the stories of these rulers, I'll just give a few examples. Lalitaditya, I mentioned about Lalitaditya. He went on a Digvijaya campaign across the length and breadth of India. And Kalhana in Rajatarangini paints a very, very, elaborate picture of that. He says he went on a Dakshina Patha also. He occupied Karnataka by, defeating the Rashtrakutas, then went to the Tamil land, then crossed over the seas and occupied Sri Lanka. He says all of this. But that is a little exaggerated. But an important element of that Digvijaya was also wherever he went and vanquished whomever, the scholars from those places would be brought back to the Kashmir kingdom. So Vakpati, then Atrigupta, Bhavabhuti, all these great scholars, they were brought to the Kashmir court, several of them. Atrigupta, for example, was the grandfather of Abhinavagupta, who founded the Kashmir school of Shaivism, Kashmir Tantra. So Kashmir then not only became geographically a huge kingdom, politically expanded, but also culturally and civilizationally a center of learning for the subcontinent. And no wonder then that later when Adi Shankara established the Sarvagnya Peeth there, and goddess Sharda, the goddess of learning, is the presiding deity, and the script there is also Sharda script. Kashmir was the pinnacle of our subcontinent and our civilization in terms of a center of knowledge and learning. So in the Indic imagination, conquest was not the only aspect. How great your kingdom was certainly measured by how many palaces you had and how many material opulence you had, but also the intellectual quotient. Were you better off with your opponent in terms of the number of scholars you had, the kind of scholars you had? So intellectual competition between kingdoms, and we see that even during the Vijayanagar Empire times. So that is one aspect which was very important, which gets featured in this book. Similarly, there are two people in the book who are not warriors in the sense that they burst out into the battlefield wearing an armor. One was Devi Ahilya Bai Holkar of Indore, who created a kind of a spiritual and cultural revival in India in the 18th century by renovating all the temples in different parts of India. And the temples that she chose also kind of gave an importance of what were the important civilizational markers, the 12 Jyotirlingas, the Char Dhams, the 7 Puris, as mentioned in the Garud Puran. All these were the temples that she renovated, from Kashi to Rameshwaram, from Dwarka to Kamrupa. She kind of united this whole nation at the time when there was the heights of Mughal and British rule. She revived the country. So she becomes a civilizational warrior. Similarly, there's another person called Rajarshi Bhagya Chandra Jaya Singh of Manipur. I'm sure none of us would have heard of his name. Even I didn't know that such a person existed. He was a man who introduced Vaishnavism in Manipur at a time when Manipur was ravaged by Burmese incursions. The Sri Govindji temple that you find in Imphal today was established by him. All the different art forms there, Manipuri Ras Leela that we see today, or Nata Sankirtana that we see there, was started by Jai Singh. So I think warrior spirit, as Arvindanji mentioned, it is the spiritual underpinning to that is very important. Along with winning battles, along with winning new lands, creating an intellectual citadel for the nation, creating beauty in everything. So when Rajaraja Chola occupied all these lands, the first thing he built was the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur, in 1010 CE. It's more than 1,000 year, one of the longest gopurams that you can find of Shiva today in India. So all these elements were very important in addition to political conquest, and we need to understand that aspect of what expansion and building of a kingdom or a Digvijaya meant in the Indic imagination.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next question would be by Dhruv Patel. Yeah. Please start.
Hello everyone. I would like to ask a question. How did you shortlist only 15 personalities?
Yeah, that was the toughest part. 15, it was more about whom to leave than whom to choose, because I think there are so many others. But in the prologue of the book too, I mentioned that, I hope that this inspires several more such attempts to bring out stories of unsung heroes and heroines, because there are lots and lots of them who have been covered up over centuries of falsified history. For me, the selection of these 15 was inspired by, as I said, one is their geographical spread across India to cover different parts of the country. Also, this the warrior spirit, whether it was in the battlefield, whether it was a civilizational courage, and an equal importance to men and women. The gender balance that was important. So that was how the shortlist was done, and through their lives, it's also the history of India seen. Now, in the book, all these people, whether it was Ghazni or Ghori, Lodhis, Khiljis, Tughlaqs, Mughals, all of them make an appearance. Now this whole notion that we should remove somebody from the history books, I think that is a very, very foolish one. In my state, in Karnataka, there is always this debate that Tipu Sultan should not be mentioned in the books. Now, you can't do that. You can't wish away your history. Whether you like the person or not, that is an indelible fact of history, and they have to remain in your books, the good, the bad, the ugly, about anybody. But the importance you give to them can be diminished. You can take away the focus away from them, mention them in passing, but your focus when you're studying the history of your nation should be on the heroes and heroines of your nation, rather than tell the story of your country as a story of invaders. I think that is an important element while shortlisting these people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to ask, since you informed us about how you shortlisted the 15 personalities, which, if there is one, is your favorite personality, you would say?
That's very, very difficult. I think each one of them in their own ways, and once you read the stories of all these are shorter stories, so it's easy to read. Each one is unique, and I think each one contributed in their own ways. It's so difficult to pick any particular person, but if at all pushed to the wall, I would actually my favorite among all of them is Ahilya Bai Holkar, because here was a lady, the kind of circumstances that she went through in life. She came from a commoner's family. Her father-in-law, Malhar Rao Holkar, while he had gone out for somewhere, he was spending a night at some place, and that's where he finds this little girl who he found was very, very precocious, very talented, and he immediately asks for her hand in marriage for his son, Khande Rao. And she gets married, she becomes the princess of Indore, and so much so that the father-in-law takes a lot of interest in the education of the daughter-in-law. We keep talking of patriarchy and all of that in India, but there are examples like this too, where the father-in-law actually, prefers the bahu over the beta. Where she is given so much of importance. She's taught finance, she's taught management, and when he's going out on battles, to the Battle of Panipat and all that, the third battle, he's constantly communicating with her, giving her political updates of the time. So she becomes so politically astute. And at that time, Khande Rao dies, and all the other wives, now this man is a delinquent man, he had a lot of wives and all that, and then all these other wives committed sati. But then the father-in-law prevails upon Ahilya Devi that you should not commit sati, you should be my source of strength and support. And so she helps him out, and after the father-in-law dies, she takes over as the queen of Indore. And during the time that she governed Indore, it was a golden period for the place, and it would probably be an example of good governance, which all of us today, leadership skills that we look at, we should probably look at that as a very, very important case study. As a woman, even today, if you go to Indore, the airport is named after her, and every place you have her statues. And she was venerated as Ma, because she was looking after not only the people, but also water kept at different parts of the streets for birds and dogs and street dogs and animals to come and drink. So that was the kind of maternal concern she had as a ruler for all her subjects, human beings as well as animals. So what an exalted example of what a leader should be, a king or a queen. You should take care of not only the the human beings, but also the animals are your subjects. Environment we talk of. So this kind of a parakashtha of that concern for everyone, which is why she got the name of Mata Hilyabai, is something that is worth emulating. But a very, very tragic personal life, despite her doing so much of devotional work, as I said, renovating temples all over the country, Kashi Vishwanath, Somnath Mandir here in Gujarat as well, which had been ravaged so many times, was something that Ahilyabai renovated. Her own daughter committed sati, and she could not prevent her from doing that. So personal life was quite miserable, but despite that she kept on, and I think it's a deeply inspiring story as a woman, as a ruler who set ideals as to what good leadership, good governance actually needs to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Sir, so I want to ask you, which historian inspired you the most to write about Indian history?
That's a very tough question. There are so many of them. I think, in the Indian setup itself, people like Dr. R.C. Majumdar, uh, he's someone who is so less celebrated, which is very, very sad. After independence, the Nehru government commissioned a project to write the history of freedom movement, and R.C. Majumdar was to head that committee. Now he made it very clear that, look here, I'm not going to make this a court history. I am going to bring out the pluses and the minuses of the freedom movement, particularly quite critical of Gandhi and his role in the movement. And for that crime, so to say, he was summarily thrown away from the committee. And somebody who is not even associated with history writing in that manner was made the chairman. And we know thereafter what narrative of freedom movement has been dinned into our heads as the official version of the Swatantrata Sangram. But R.C. Majumdar never gave up. He went on to write his own books, and there's a magnificent 3-volume history of the freedom struggle of India, which I would urge all of you to read. It's freely available on archive.org, and also reprints of this have now come, which one can purchase and read. There's actually a 11-volume series of the entire history of India, her people and culture, or something is the title, in which 3 volumes are on the freedom movement, where every aspect of the freedom movement, the non-violent struggle, the armed rebellion from different parts, the tribal revolt, the sannyasi rebellion, different parts of India, the revolutionary movement, all this has been covered by him in an equanimous manner. So I think the whole style of the immense research that one puts and also makes it balanced and inclusive is something that Dr. Majumdar is not celebrated enough for. Other people like Jadunath Sarkar. Sir Jadunath Sarkar was someone thanks to whom we know the entire history of Aurangzeb for what he was. He was someone who learnt Persian to ensure that he read all the inscriptions of Aurangzeb, the Fatwa-i Alamgiri and all these other documents, got them back into circulation. So his books on Aurangzeb, on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, all of these are again milestones, I would say, in historiography. There's also Ram Swaroop ji, Sitaram Goyal ji, Dharampal ji, all these people whose works I think should now be revived, and we should read this alternative version of history. History is a discipline where there are going to be multiple opinions, multiple voices. For the longest time, there's been only one voice that has been heard of, especially after independence. I think the time has come where all the different voices are heard, and then your opinion is made as to which side seems more, logical and sensible to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Namaskar and good morning, all the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. Sir, my question is, what were the catalytic factors or causes leading to Indian liberations from British yoke? What were the catalytic factors or causes leading to Indian liberations from British yoke?
That's an interesting question, for which I think we as a nation have really not found. Please take a seat, ma'am.
It's fine,
We've not found an answer even after 75 years. And the key to that question comes from an episode in history which has been recorded in the memoirs of this man called Justice Chakraborty, Bhani Bhushan Chakraborty. In the 1950s, Clement Attlee, who was the Prime Minister of Britain when the transfer of power happened between Britain and India, comes to India after independence. This is 1952 or 53, and he goes to different parts of India. He also goes to Calcutta, where Chakraborty is not only the Chief Justice of the Calcutta High Court, he is also the acting governor of Bengal. And this constant question plagued Indian minds. If you also hear, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's interview, BBC interview, which is there, I think, on YouTube, he also says we all were so alarmed as to why the British left us in such a haste. We never expected them to go so quickly. Now, Chakraborty asked the same question to Clement Attlee, saying, why did you leave us? And he very categorically said that it was the heroics of the Indian National Army, the INA, and of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose that petrified us enough. And we had just come out of the Second World War, we were economically crippled and all of that. So the British did not want an uprising, a Bagawat in the British Indian Army. Now, constantly the fear was there should not be a repeat of 1857, a carnage. And to do that, the Congress also was created initially as what was known as a safety valve to ensure that there is no repeat of 1857. But once the revolt started within the British Indian Army, they decided that this is going to become very lethal, and that's why we had to leave. And this is what Clement Attlee says. Now, Chakraborty then further pushed him a bit and said, what was the role or the impact of Gandhi and the Quit India movement in your final decision to leave India? And with a smirk on his face, Clement Attlee is supposed to have said, and it is noted in his memoirs, I'm not saying this, the words he used for that is minimal. So 1942, the Quit India movement was launched. It was crushed within a few months. It would have been a great, stretch of imagination that 5 years later, that movement, which was crushed within 2-3 months, had such an impact that it forced the British to leave, which is what we are made to believe, that we kept saying quit India, and then finally the British got bored and said, chalo, chale jate hain. They've been asking so peacefully for so long. So, that muhavra of laton ke bhoot baaton se nahi mante, till the time people pick up arms and ensure that you're driven out, a colonizing power like Britain would not have left India. But this idea as to why we got our freedom, it's such a travesty that we're not even a grateful nation. We don't even have historical remembrance, that we don't think it's important to know why we got freedom. Who was the people who actually helped us get freedom? We just take it for granted because none of us were born in pre-independent India. So independence comes very cheap to all of us. But in the process, what were the important factors? Who were the important people who made those sacrifices? Even after 75 years, we don't question that. We don't even want to look at those aspects of our history, which is very bad. And I think there is a need to relook this in a very, very dispassionate, unemotional, clinical, and an objective manner where only facts speak and not emotions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jai Hind, sir. In the view of the previous question, I'll just take it from there. So, as you were suggesting that there are so many distortions in history writing, most of when history has been written from the invaders and colonials, perspective. So, as students of history, from where we should begin the journey of understanding when textbooks of the product of such history writing are presented to us?
Yeah. So I think now it's a great question, and I keep getting asked this often, that when will our textbooks change? I say, this is a great question asked to the wrong person, because I don't have any ears and eyes or anything of the government of India or anybody inside to actually say when the textbooks of this country will change. We've had HRD ministers who very proudly said not a word of our history books have been changed. Well, that should be something to be ashamed of and not proud of. So there is a problem when it comes to the system. But I think outside the system now, a lot of people have started, writing, which would not have been possible maybe 15 years ago or whatever. Now there is a renewed awakening among Indians, and that cannot be stopped. That is a process which I think goes beyond politics, beyond who is in power, what ideology, all that. This is an Indian awakening, and lots of books from alternative perspectives, if you can call it that, are coming. Arvindanji is here. His books, his works, his articles. People like Sanjeev Sanyal, J. Sai Deepak. All these people are writing a lot of interesting, fresh perspectives to the same history. So I think today, and the biggest plus today is we are in the information age where everything is available to everyone. You can't hide facts. You can't fabricate evidence for too long. And social media, for all its pluses and minuses, is also a great leveler. I remember recently there was some, I think on Holi or something, there was that famous photograph, right, where Lord Krishna is showing the finger towards the sky, and all the gopas and gopis are following him. And some eminent historian actually wrote on social media that this was a Mughal painting, and Krishna is actually pointing to the Eid Ka Chand. And so, what a great Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, syncretic culture, everybody was celebrating everything together and all kinds of nonsense like that. There were some handles on Twitter, including, I think, the one you all know of, True Indology, and several others, who actually debunked this with sources. They said this is a Rajasthani miniature painting. It's not a Mughal painting, first of all. There are certain elements of that painting which ensured that that was true. And also, this was a much ancient story where they're all pointing out going towards Nand Baba's palace. So the kind of distortion that is made, just because there is a crescent moon there, that doesn't mean that is Eid Ka Chand, and that doesn't give us an indication that this was Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. So there are, even in minor things like a painting, you can see the amount of distortion that is made to change that history, which is being challenged now by commoners, by other people who are writing. So I think it's a great time to be in, where Indian history is being revisited this way. And with time, once textbooks also change, I think that movement will become a lot more scalable. So at least I am optimistic about the future.
Thank you, sir. I think taking inspiration from you, students who are present here may take up history writing as a career.
I do hope.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Hello, Jai Hind sir.
Jai Hind.
I am a faculty of CSC department. My name is Yogeshwari Makwana. मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि जैसे कि जब हिस्ट्री लिखी गई या फिर जब हमें इंडिपेंडेंस मिला 1947 में, जब इंडिया इंडिपेंडेंट हुआ, तब दो लोग काम कर रहे थे. एक थे हिंसावादी जो भगत सिंह थे, लाला लाजपत राय थे, बिपिन चंद्र पाल. दे वर अदर साइड की जो हिस्ट्री में हमें पता चलता है कि हिंसा के साथ वो भगाना चाहते थे अंग्रेज़ों को इंडिया से. एंड द अदर साइड गांधी जी एंड ऑल अदर पॉलिटिशियंस विच विल सपोर्टेड, वो सपोर्ट करते थे कि नहीं, हमें अहिंसा से ये हिस्ट्री लेनी है. तो आई वुड लाइक टू से दैट कि इन योर बुक, क्योंकि जो राइटर्स होते हैं वो सोशल समाज के लिए बहुत बड़ा काम करते हैं, क्योंकि लोग बुक्स पढ़ते हैं, वहाँ से उन्हें नॉलेज मिलता है. तो आप मतलब मैं ये नहीं पूछना था, इट इज़ अ डिबेटेबल क्वेश्चन, बिकॉज आज के टाइम में इस पे बहुत डिबेट चल रहा है कि दोनों साइड से ही हुआ था. तो भगत सिंह को इतना रिस्पेक्ट क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है कि जितना गांधी जी को मिल रहा है. तो इट इज़ अ डिबेटेबल क्वेश्चन. पर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि आपके सिनारियो, जैसे राइटर जब लिखते हैं तो उनका पूरा व्यू होता है वहाँ पे, तो इन योर व्यू हम जानना चाहते हैं रियलिटी कि क्या है रियलिटी ऐसा. थैंक यू.
तो मेरे व्यू से ज़्यादा मैंने वही बोला कि जो क्लेमेंट एटली साहब थे, जो ब्रिटेन के प्रधानमंत्री थे उस वक्त जब भारत को स्वतंत्रता मिली, वो खुद अगर लिख रहे हैं और कब इसके बारे में बता रहे हैं जब भारत ऑलरेडी स्वतंत्र हो चुका था, तो उस वक्त उनको भारत आके नेताजी की प्रशंसा करना और गांधी के मूवमेंट को मिनिमल कहने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं थी। वो तो भारत तब आज़ाद भी हो गया था। तो एक तो ब्रिटिश सरकार का खुद का व्यू ये था जो इम्पॉर्टेंट है टू नोट। बट एट द सेम टाइम अगर आप निष्पक्ष होके आप देखें, जब जब अंग्रेज़ों ने अलग अलग रिफॉर्म्स किए, जो हम इतिहास की किताबों में पढ़ते हैं, मॉर्लेमेंटो रिफॉर्म्स हो, मॉन्टेगू चेम्सफोर्ड रिफॉर्म्स, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट, फिर फाइनली भारत की स्वतंत्रता, उन सब के पहले दे वर ऑल प्रिसीडेड बाय ब्लडी एक्ट्स ऑफ रेवोल्यूशन। मॉर्लेमेंटो रिफॉर्म्स से पहले in the 1900s, that Kalkhand, you had the entire Anushilan Samiti, Abhinav Bharat of Savarkar in Maharashtra, Anushilan Samiti of Aurobindo, of Prafulla Chaki, Kanhayalal Dutt, all these people, Barin Ghosh. After that, they gave in to certain reforms. In the next decade, you had the Gadar movement, which was a transcontinental movement. वो सिर्फ भारत तक सीमित नहीं था, वो जर्मनी, कनाडा, सैन फ्रांसिस्को, वहाँ से बैठ के लाला हरदयाल और सारे जो सिख नेता थे, वो किस तरह से भारत को स्वाधीन बनाने के लिए उन्होंने कोशिश की। तो उसके बाद आया हमारा मॉन्टेगू चेम्सफोर्ड रिफॉर्म्स, और 1930 का कालखंड जब HRA का पहला गठन हुआ, सचिंद्रनाथ सान्याल हो, अशफाकुल्ला खान, राम प्रसाद बिस्मिल और फिर भगत सिंह, सुखदेव, राजगुरु, उनके बाद ही गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट आया। फिर इलेक्शंस होना शुरू हुए 1937 में टू डिफरेंट प्रोविंसेस, और फिर आफ्टर द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ INA बाय राश बिहारी बोस एंड देन नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस उसमें जुड़ गए, उसके बाद ही हमें फाइनली आज़ादी मिली। तो जैसे मैंने उस सवाल के जवाब में बोला कि लातों के भूत बातों से नहीं मानते, तो जब भी the fear of the gun, the fear of arms led the British government to give concessions and finally freedom. बट इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि जो अहिंसात्मक आंदोलन था उसका कोई महत्व था ही नहीं। उसने देश में एक जागृति फैलाई, देश में एक भारतीय होने का जो मूल भावना है वो फैलाया, और एक नेशनलिस्टिक फीलिंग अमंग पीपल, कॉमन पीपल की आज़ादी की चाह जो है वो लोगों में जागृत किया, जो बहुत ही ज़रूरी था, एक मोबिलाइजेशन। बट एट द सेम टाइम the other part was the one which was leading this revolution। और 1857 की क्रांति को अगर आप देखें, जो वीर सावरकर ने फर्स्ट वॉर ऑफ इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस के नाम से उसको दिया था, परिभाषित किया था, वहाँ से लेके 1946 में जो नेवल म्यूटिनी, हम उसको आज भी म्यूटिनी बोलते हैं, जबकि उसको हम सिपाही म्यूटिनी बोलते थे, जो सावरकर ने फर्स्ट वॉर ऑफ इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस बोला। द नेवल म्यूटिनी विच वाज द लास्ट नेल इन द कॉफिन ऑफ द ब्रिटिश इंपीरियलिज्म शुड आइडियली बी कॉल्ड द लास्ट वॉर ऑफ इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस। पर आज भी विडंबना यह है कि हम अपने इतिहास की किताबों में और कॉमन चर्चा में उसको म्यूटिनी, नेवल म्यूटिनी बोलते हैं। जो जब द रॉयल इंडियन नेवी इन बॉम्बे और आर्मी के गुटों में एक बगावत फैल गई थी 1946 में, फेब्रुवरी 1946 फेब्रुवरी में ये म्यूटिनी शुरू होता है, और 3 हफ्तों के अंदर कैबिनेट मिशन प्लान भेजा जाता है भारत को कि जल्द से जल्द माउंट बैटन वाज गिवन द एडवाइस कि फ्रॉम दैट रेकेज यू सैल्वेज व्हाटएवर यू कैन एंड कम बैक, वी डोंट वांट मोर इंग्लिश लाइव्स टू बी लॉस्ट इन द इंडियन सबकॉन्टिनेंट। तो ये अगर हम तथ्यों के आधार पे और ऐतिहासिक सत्यों के आधार पे हम इसका मूल्यांकन करें, विश्लेषण करें, तब आई थिंक एक सच्चा और एक समग्र चित्र प्रस्तुत होता है। पर मैं बार बार इसको रेखांकित करना चाहता हूं कि जब हम वी शुड नॉट रिपीट द मिस्टेक ऑफ द पास्ट। जब अहिंसात्मक आंदोलन को बढ़ा चढ़ा के बोलने के दौरान जिस तरह से जो रेवोल्यूशनरीज को नीचा किया गया, वी शुड नॉट रिपीट दैट। इसको बढ़ाने के लिए गांधी जी को फला चुना बोलना या फिर अहिंसात्मक आंदोलन की निंदा करना, वो गलत बात है। आई थिंक हर एक गुट का अपना एक योगदान था, और हर एक और सारे जो थे देशभक्त थे, nobody was anybody's, it's very easy, हम this was a British stooge, वो एक British stooge था, हम अपने एयर कंडीशन कमरों में बैठ के सर्टिफिकेट पास करते रहते हैं हर एक के बारे में, प्रो और एंटी, और उससे जो है इतिहास को जिस तरह से नुकसान होता है वो बहुत ही खराब बात है, और इसको एक समग्र पिक्चर से देखना चाहिए, और एवरीबडी हैड देयर इंपॉर्टेंस एंड रोल एंड नोबडी शुड बी डिसरेस्पेक्टेड बिकॉज ऑल ऑफ देम वर वर्किंग टुवर्ड्स अ कॉमन पर्पस. देश को आज़ाद कराना सबकी एक मंशा थी. उस गंतव्य तक कैसे पहुंचे, अलग अलग रास्ते थे बस. तो हर एक रास्ता अपने ही तरीके से बहुत ही मूल्यवान था.
Good morning, sir.
जी, good morning.
So my question is, are we not sidelining the national history by putting more and more emphasis on the regional history?
First of all, what is national and what is regional?
So national means considering overall the India, and regional means considering the part of India, such as northeast, southern India.
How do you make national history? When you say we want to talk about the national history,
Yes.
what are the components? All of India आपने बोला, so all of India has the northeast.
Yes, sir.
So is a national history is the sum of the parts?
Yes.
So every part of India is a part of the nation. So every part which one can call as regional. पहले तो the Marxist historians keep telling us that there was no concept of a nation. It's only the British gave us a sense of nationhood and all of that. Then there is no national, there is no regional. Every part of India is, a part of the nation. So when you talk of the Chola history, is it regional or is it national?
So it is a part of national, but
Mughal is national.
yes, sir.
Why is that? How much of India did the Mughals actually occupy?
Sir, they occupied almost all of the India except
No.
the South Kerala and
No,
Tamil part of
no,
Tamil Nadu
no.
and northeast.
That was only towards the end of the Mughal rule during Aurangzeb. Even at the peak of Akbar's rule, if you see the maps of India at that time, they did not have, under the Mauryas, under even, what about the Maratha history? Is Maratha history national or regional?
So Maratha history is part of the nation but confined to the Deccan area.
My God, no. So in fact, after the death of Aurangzeb, which was in 1707, till the Maratha War, 1818, India was virtually under the Marathas. And we are always fed that the British took over India from the Mughals, whereas the British actually took over India from the Marathas. From Attak to Katak, as they said, and almost till Rameshwaram. It was the Maratha flag, the Hindavi Swarajya, which was flying across the subcontinent. So the Mughal was there, but he was a puppet of the Marathas. They ensured that he was sitting on the throne in Delhi, and that's why when Ahmad Shah Abdali also comes during the third battle of Panipat, it was the Marathas who go and protect the Delhi throne. So the Maratha history is in that way national history, and I think this is the symptomatic thing that we have subconsciously, which I mentioned even in my opening comments, that we think anything around Delhi is national. Tamil Nadu, Assam, Maharashtra, Gujarat, these are small regions. But that small region around NCR today is the nation. The rest of it is somewhat different from mainstream. I think that needs to be challenged, where every part, there is no region, there is no mainstream. Every part of India is the nation. And if you're talking of the history of Bharat, history of every region becomes very important in that narrative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My question to you is, what is your message for young seekers like us who do not come from history background, and how they can explore and understand and make career in history writing?
By reading a lot. I think that is very important. I keep emphasizing on that you need to read versions of all ideological spectrums, rather than limit yourself to one thing. You may you may dislike, whatever, but even if you dislike someone, read your opponent, understand the opponent's arguments. Only when you understand that, you can come up with a counter or a rebuttal. As far as pursuing a career in historiography is concerned, I must warn that it is an area full of landmines. You don't know which bomb is going to go on your face at what time. In the last couple of years, since the time my own books on Savarkar came out, it obviously upset a lot of status quo, establishmentarians, and so on. And the kind of backlash, attacks, vicious attacks that have happened is something that I knew it would happen, but I never expected it would be this vitriolic and difficult. I must mention here, my first book, as was mentioned, came out in 2008 on Mysore, the Wodeyars of Mysore, who incidentally came from Gujarat. The first rulers of Mysore, Yaduraya and Krishnaraya, they were princes from Dwarka in Gujarat, who later came to Mysore and established that kingdom. Now, during that, after the book came out, there was a talk somewhere in Bangalore, which I was giving on Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, who usurped the kingdom from the Wodeyars. So you had a Hindu ruler, you had a Muslim soldier who took over the kingdom for a brief period from the ruler. Now, in that lecture, I was asked, I was talking about Tipu's so-called secular image that is, bandied today, and I was reading out letters from Tipu himself, not my own stories, but Tipu's own letters to his generals saying, go to Kerala, Malabar, and break all these temples, convert so many people, bloodshed, actually congratulating them for what they did. And while I was doing that, a set of people from the audience started raising slogans. There were paper rockets that were hurled at the dais, and quickly the organizers came and took me away. The lecture was also, abruptly stopped. And next morning on main page of newspapers, this came that there was a huge ruckus at a Tipu lecture. Now, my father was sitting in the first row, and there was some Tipu fan club or some such thing which was there. They came and gave him some pamphlets and also told him that, you have only one son. So if you want him to live long, you better tell him to watch out about what he speaks. And you can imagine that I was probably 26 or 27. I didn't know that this is such a, minefield then. And I came back home and there was mayhem at home. My mother also made me swear that Ainda se in public you are not going to give any lectures on Tipu Sultan. And I said yes to her and took an oath, so to say. But then, now my mother is no longer there, so I broke that promise to her. And now my next biography is going to be on Tipu Sultan. Forget lecture, it's going to be a full-fledged biography on Tipu Sultan, his pluses and minuses. And I don't know after this whether I'll have to take citizenship outside India ya kya karna padega. But the point I'm trying to make is it is not for the faint-hearted. It is a kind of a dharma yudh, if I can use that term, where a lot of warrior spirit, so to say, is needed even for the writer, for the researcher, because you're shaking a lot of established facts and vested interests. That is not going to be taken lightly. In the political spectrum, we see, someone like a Narendra Modi who comes from the outside, who comes from Gujarat. To this day, there is backlash because people who have sat in their fortresses for decades would not like any outsider coming and shaking up, their privileged positions. So same kind of dog in the manger attitude is there even in historiography. It's probably more vicious here than in politics, where, the kind of attacks that are done on you. So it is not for the faint-hearted. But if you really jump into this dharma yuddha, I think your country, this nation and its future generations will owe a great amount of gratitude for the kind of narrative that you're putting back. And that's not just for something of you will say something and it's over. This is going to last hopefully generation after generation. Our children, our grandchildren, their children are going to read this, and you're creating that legacy for the future. So I think that is something that I hope a lot of young people here take note of. It's not a simple thing, acha kuch kitab likh diya, some history, this, that. History is not something so flimsy. It is a mirror in which we can identify ourselves as a nation, as a civilization, as a people. It gives us a sense of identity. So if you are giving this identity not only to yourself, but several future generations. Imagine the kind of service that you are doing to your motherland. So I would urge some of you who might be interested to take up the challenge, to do this in your own little ways, and participate in this huge revolution, a movement, so to say, to correct the distortions of Indian history.
Okay, so you spoke in detail about the distortions.
Yeah.
Right. So my question is, what compels the historians to distort, and do we understand their agenda or the purpose behind doing so?
That's a good question. And I think Arvindanji made a mention of this when he said, the template that was created for historians after independence was Nehru's discovery of India. And this was the framework on which you had to follow, you had to improvise on that. I mentioned R.C. Majumdar ji getting thrown out of government committees. So a lot of other historians are looking at this, saying if you need to excel in your career, if you need to excel in academics, if you need to get fellowships, if you need to get all of that, you have to toe a certain line. If you don't, then you will have to pay the price. So then subconsciously even they know that what the ruler wants, we will provide only that. So a historian is not a chef. Master orders, आज मुझे तीखा खाना है तो मुझे I want this, मुझे आज मीठा खाना है तो I will make something else. But that is how it tends to become. A historian's work is not to ally himself or herself with the political ideology of the times. Their work or responsibility is to illuminate the archives, illuminate the truth, and bring the truth as it is in front of the public. It may be unpalatable to someone, it may not be comfortable for somebody else. That is not their lookout. But it tends to become like that, where, yatha raja tatha praja type of a situation. Whatever the Raja wants, the historians will provide. So I think in the course of that, we had this, and as I mentioned earlier, the ideological tilt to this too, of Marxist historiography, which always looks at clashes between groups. History as class struggle, as they always like to call it, between the upper caste and the lower caste, between Hindus and Buddhists. All kinds of mythical fights are also set up where they don't exist. A civilizational continuity of this country is not acknowledged, focusing, as I said, only on the negative aspects, and also whitewashing the crimes of the past, particularly the long trail of Islamic conquest that we've had, which has made it a wounded civilization. And as American historian Will Durant had called it, as one of the bloodiest tales of human history. Those are all whitewashed because they feel talking about that will upset today's society. So all these motivations ensure that you have a very warped view of our own past. So political motivations and ideological underpinnings, I think all of that contribute to a very, very fragmented and distorted version of what India's history is, and that's a very, very sad part. But today, after 75 years, there is a look back, there is a revision, which is much needed and I think welcome. Thank you.